share this powerful revelation that I received last week. And I was thinking that I might save it for tomorrow night's live feed. But that really is a different venue. The Am I Still a Christian series is more of an exploratory conversation about what are the different things that make us Christian, that I'm sort of pondering as I think about what it means to be a Christian. This is something different, and I think this is the beginning of a different vehicle, a different communication medium that you're going to get from me. Years ago, when my wife and I were pondering if it was time to launch an actual ministry, God had given me the title or the name More Than a Conqueror. And we had since sort of absorbed that to become the vehicle and the name, the mechanism for when we have to raise funds for Ariella and to support Ariella's condition and care, and as we think about maybe growing that into a family foundation, we have sort of been using More Than a Conqueror in that way. Now it may be time to reclaim that and come up with a different name for the work that we do around Nemelin myopathy. I still am going to have the conversation with Rachel, but for the time being, we'll call this the inaugural message, if you will, through the More Than a Conqueror's ministry. Now, here's the revelation. And for folks that have been in church for a while, maybe you grew up in church, or maybe you've been in church for a while, you're familiar, at least, even if you don't know it really, really well, you're familiar with the Esther story. And there may be folks that may be new to church, new to the Christian walk, that aren't as familiar. So if you aren't as familiar with the Esther story, I'm going to give a little background. If you are familiar, bear with me. And if I miss something, please feel free to put it in the comment section. So the story of Esther, the way the story of Esther goes is that it begins with the Israelites still in exile. And we'll talk about, and there's a great series on the BibleProject.com. If you go to the Bible Project YouTube channel, they have a whole series of animated videos on exile and what it means to be in exile and different exile periods for Israel. Great stuff, a great watch. I definitely recommend that you check out the BibleProject.com. This particular story is set in what we understand to be a period of exile with Israel. There are Israelites still living in the territory, in the kingdom of Babylon. We'll talk about, I'm going to give you a little bit more insight on that in a second, but I just want to frame the Esther story. So the Israelites are still living in Babylon under the rule of King Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus. King Ahasuerus. King Ahasuerus decides that he wants to throw a massive celebration to just celebrate his kingdom, his rule, what Babylon has been able to do, the kingdom of Persia, its expansion. So he throws this massive, and I'm talking about, Prince ain't got nothing on this cat. This cat is partying, partying like it's 1999. This dude throws a party, and this festival lasts something like 6 months. I mean, he gets all his boys together, and they throw down, and there's food, and there's drink, and there's just all sorts of, you let your imagination go. Don't let your imagination go too crazy. But this is a serious party, okay? This is a serious festival. And he wants to cap off his 6-month-long celebration with a week of celebrating and parading his wife in front of his friends and the partygoers. And so he sends for his wife. Now his wife, the Queen Vashti is hanging out with her ladies and kind of with the women, the wives of the men that have come to party with the king. So the king gets his boys together and they go kind of over here, and the queen and their wives kind of go over this way. And so the king grabs one of his eunuchs and says, go get the queen. I need to speak with the queen. I want the queen to come, have the queen dress herself up, tell her to put on her best. I want her Flossie to parade her in front of my boys. I want to show off my queen to my boys. And so the queen is summoned, and the queen doesn't come. That's unheard of. The king summons for the queen, and Vashti's like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to hang out over here with my girls. I'm really not for going to your court and to your throne room and parading myself around in whatever you want me to wear. I'm straight. And so the queen is like, what? But check this. His boys are like, oh, king, nah, dude, that can't stand. You can't have your lady defying you, because if the queen doesn't have to be subject to the king, my wife don't have to be subject to me. Nah, dude, you got to fix that. That cannot stand. You got to do something about that. So now the king can't look like a punk in front of his boys. So the king is like, okay, you don't want to come? Check this. You're no longer queen. Not only am I stripping you of the crown and your title, yo, you don't get to leave your court, like the room, the harem area. You don't get to leave there. I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to imprison you per se. You just can't leave. If you don't want to come see me, then you don't go see anybody. You're on lockdown for life. Period. End of that story. Sends a proclamation out. Vashti's no longer queen, but now the king needs a queen. So he sends out another proclamation to all the territories and basically says, of all the lands in my kingdom, send forth your most beautiful women, and I'm going to have a beauty contest. I'm going to have a Miss Queen of Persia, Miss Queen of Babylon contest to see who's the dopest of them all, and the dopest of them all will win the honor of being my queen. So the proclamation goes out, all these women begin to array and assemble themselves, and among the women is this Jewish woman named Esther. And Esther eventually makes her way to the king's court, where she has an opportunity to meet the king and is selected as queen. There's a number of details that we will get to, I think, maybe in another feed, another broadcast, another video, where I kind of break down the nuance of this. But needless to say, there's a couple factors. Here's the key factor. The king made available to all of the contestants, if you will, the opportunity to make one request of the king to be a part of their interview process. So they could basically ask the king for any one thing that they wanted as part of their interview process, and the king would grant it. Esther didn't want anything. So when the king summoned for Esther and asked, what is her request? The usher, the ambassador, what have you, said to the king, she's asked nothing. Now, it's also not known to the king that Esther is a Jew. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Esther is being raised by her uncle, Mordecai. Mordecai is a servant in the king's court. Mordecai tells Esther not to disclose the fact that she's a Jew. This is very, very important detail. So when Esther goes before the king, two things keep in mind. Number one, Esther doesn't request anything of the king. She just goes before the king for her interview. Number two, Esther does not disclose the fact that she is a Jew. He just lets her know. She lets the king know what region she's from, what territory she's from, but she doesn't go into any more detail than that. So the king is immediately impressed by the fact that Esther doesn't ask for anything. To boot, on top of that, Esther's dope. Esther's fly. So the king is like, you win. I don't need to see anybody else. This is my queen. Let's make it happen. So Esther is selected as queen. Simultaneously to that, or around the same time, the king also promotes one of the dudes, one of his boys that's in his court, a man by the name of Haman, to sort of the office of chief helper, number 2. Haman gets promoted to the number 2 in the kingdom, and for all intents and purposes, a proclamation goes out, and essentially the proclamation is, wherever Haman is, if I'm not there, Haman is to be viewed as the king in my absence. This is my right-hand guy, this is my dude, this is my number 2, and if I ain't in the building, y'all treat him as the king. Show him due respect. Mordecai, remember, Esther's uncle, a Jew, works in the king's court. Mordecai refuses to bow to Haman. Because of his Jewish customs and tradition, he doesn't bow to any man outside of perhaps the ultimate authority in the land, the ultimate ruler, the king. But he's certainly not going to bow before a surrogate to the king. So Haman is like, yo, I'm the number 2. And basically, when the king ain't around, I'm the king. And Mordecai's perspective is, yeah, no, you're not the king. And I'm not bowing. So Haman is like, this is not acceptable. So Haman essentially convinces the king to sign a law, to sign a decree, wiping out all the Jews. All the Jews got to go. This dude, Mordecai, does not want to subject himself to me. He only bows to the one true God, which is crazy, because how is there only one God? And I never really liked the Jews to begin with. They have all these strange customs. They don't really fool up with us like that. Yo, we're just, king, let's just get rid of them. Let's just get rid of all of them and be done with it. Now, here's an important detail about the Jews still living in the region, all right? I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds and Bible stuff. I want you to stay with me. This is really important to understanding the revelation that's to come. I know I've been laying a strong foundation here. I appreciate you hanging with me. This is going to pay off. So here's the important thing to know about this period in kind of Jewish history. Israel had been granted their freedom. Israel had been granted their freedom by previous kings. And what had happened was there were leaders that wrote about their exodus. There's a couple of books in the Old Testament, one titled Ezra and one titled Nehemiah, that describe the process of the Jews leaving Babylon, leaving Persia, and going to reclaim Jerusalem. Ezra talks about the rebuilding of the temple, and Nehemiah talks about the rebuilding of the wall, which is essentially the rebuilding of the city, establishing the city of Jerusalem as their home base, as Israel's home base. So many, many, many Israelites have been granted their emancipation proclamation. They're not slaves anymore. They're not in exile. God has moved on the hearts of the king to say, let the Israelites go and reestablish themselves. And a number of Israelites leave, but not all. Right? like in American history, the Emancipation Proclamation takes place, and a lot of slaves leave the South, but a bunch still hang around. A bunch still stay on the plantation. Why are we going to leave? We got it good here. Master takes good care of us. We got food. We got shelter. Why am I going to go up north or go west or go somewhere else? I don't know what's out there. I don't know anything about that. So a number of Israelites stay behind in the enemy territory, even though they've been permitted to leave, even though they've been freed. So there are Israelites living in Babylon, living in Persia, the kingdom of Persia, living in Babylon, even though God has set them free. So that's where we are. That's where we are right now. So Haman is like, you know what? We're just going to kill him. They should have left. Y'all didn't leave. So we're just going to wipe you out. We're going to kill you. Mordecai gets word to Esther. Esther, I know I told you to keep your Jewish heritage, your Jewish ethnicity on the DL, on the down low. I know I told you to keep that to yourself. But we about to get killed out here. Haman is wilding out. He had the king sign a new law. The executioners are getting ready. They about to start marching through our territory and wiping us out. Yo, you gotta talk to the king. You gotta get a meeting with the king. You gotta get a conversation with the king and try to convince him not to kill us. I don't know what you're gonna do. I don't know how you're gonna do it, but perhaps God has put you in the kingdom, in the king's house as the queen for such a time as this. Right? Perhaps, even though you're technically not supposed to be in Babylon, because we were supposed to be out of here. We were supposed to be gone. So even though you're here, even though you're not really supposed to be here, because it wasn't God's perfect will for you to be here, but because we hung around, because we stayed, perhaps God is using you to ensure that the Israelites stay safe in spite of this law that says we all gotta die. Perhaps God is using you for such a time as this. Esther takes a huge risk and asks for a meeting with the king. You don't ask to see the king. Don't matter if you're the queen. Don't matter who you are. You don't ask to see the king. The king summons you. You don't ask to see the king. He goes to get you. You don't go get the king. You don't do that. That in and of itself could be worthy of a death penalty. That in and of itself, if the king is having a rough day and someone in his court says, King, Esther would like to have a word, that could be enough for him to be like, what? Is she crazy? She's trying to come see me? I didn't ask for her. I didn't call for her. She's done. She's done. I got to go find me another queen because now she's done. The king doesn't do that. He accepts the meeting and Esther begins to lay the groundwork. Fast forward, Esther reveals that she's a Jew, reveals the fact that Haman is trying to kill her and her people. Haman is eventually executed on the very device that he had commissioned to execute Mordecai. Haman had a special gallows built that he was going to use to execute Mordecai, and it turns out that the king ends up executing Haman on this very gallows. And the Israelites are spared. The Israelites are spared. So, okay, Charles, that's a powerful story. What's the revelation? You and I, some of us are in Babylon, and we're not supposed to be. Some of us are in a place, in a situation, in an environment where we're out of place. We were given an opportunity to make an exit, and we didn't. We chose to stay where we were for any number of reasons. Any number of reasons, we were not where we were supposed to be, and yet God is going to make a way for His Spirit to be glorified through you, even though you're not where you're supposed to be. That's how merciful and how gracious and how powerful God is. God is going to use you to turn a situation around for you, for your family, for your community, even though you're out of place, because God's perfect will is going to be done. is going to be done in your life. And this is your opportunity to be used by God. Some of you are looking around at your circumstances like, this is not right. This does not feel right. I'm not in a right situation. I got to get out of here. I do not belong here. I'm out of place. I don't understand. I'm hurting. I'm suffering. I can't make. I'm miserable at work. I'm not very productive. I keep getting passed over and I keep getting looked over, and I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. I'm stressed out all day long. I show up at the office. I have a hard time smiling. I have a hard time letting my light shine because there's just so much darkness around me. There's so much pressure around me. I'm just having a difficult time breaking through. And what I'm telling you is that God is saying, stay put. Stay put. There was an opportunity for you to go. You missed that opportunity. But now I need you to stay put because I'm about to use you to turn the entire environment around. I'm about to use you to change the atmosphere. Because what happened after Haman was killed? There was an opening for a new number 2. Who got promoted to the new number 2? Mordecai. The man that refused to bow to Haman. The man that refused to compromise his Jewish principles. The man that refused to bow in the face of certain death. The man that said, you know what? I might have messed up. I might have did wrong, but I'm not going to compound one mistake with another mistake. I should have left when my cousins left. I should have left when my auntie left. I should have left when I was given this opportunity to go to another area, to go to a different department. It was a department I didn't know. It was a brand new job. I had no idea what that job was about. Instead, I chose to stay and continue to do what I've been doing because I was comfortable. But now things got uncomfortable. Things got tight. A bunch of policies have changed to make it harder for me to do my job. And I just want to quit and I just want to walk away. But you know what? I'm going to stay. I should have left when God said leave. But now I'm going to stay. I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to make another mistake. I'm going to stay put. And because I stayed put, God is giving him another promotion. God is going to give you that. Just because you missed one window doesn't mean that the opportunity is past. I'm telling you, hang in there, stay put. This is the season. This is the time. This is the environment where God is going to use you not only to turn your situation around, but to turn the atmosphere, to turn the culture, to turn the environment. Why? Because you made one mistake, but even in making that mistake, you never compromised your faith. You never gave up on your faith. You never gave up on your belief in Christ Jesus. You never gave up on your belief that God has something for you, that you are there for a purpose, you are there for a plan, and you are there for such a time as this. Think about everything that God orchestrated in order to ensure that the Israelites would be spared. The king had this huge party. During the course of the party, the king wanted to see his wife. God put a spirit of hard-heartedness on the wife, kind of like he did with Pharaoh, where she refused to see the king. So the king sits down the wife, looks for a new wife. All the time, this girl, this young woman, Esther, being raised by her uncle, don't know anything about what's happening in the kingdom, don't know anything about the fact that her family had an opportunity to leave, and for some reason her uncle stayed behind and her parents passed away, so she's being raised by her uncle so that she can be in an environment so when the king's hard-headed wife don't submit herself, the king goes to look for a new wife. The king finds a new wife in Esther. Mordecai, working in the king's court, refuses to bow, so the plans of Haman become known, and become known in such a way that Mordecai can influence his niece to say, influence your husband to spare these people, and in the process of sparing these people, I'm going to get promoted, and as I get promoted, now I'm in a position, now I'm in an opportunity to influence all of Babylon, this wicked nation, this God-forsaken forsaken nation. Now I can influence all of Babylon and move them in the direction of worshiping the one true God. God is going to move you in such a way, move you into such a place because you didn't bow, because you didn't give up, because you didn't forsake the name, because you didn't forsake the Spirit, because you never gave in. God is going to promote you. He's going to elevate you to a place where you will be able to influence the culture and turn it into Jesus culture. Thus says the Lord.